give a big show of hands just so we can see who isn't raising hands. Okay, so there's quite a few people that are familiar with this. So with us today, Dr. Rick Foster, Renee Wallace, and Darnell Adams, all who have been working on the FoodPLUS Detroit project for some time. MSUglobal has been involved in the project, so we've had an opportunity to see this grow. There's an exciting event that happened in September in the convening, bringing a number of community members from Detroit, other partners together to really get things moving. And so what we're here to talk about today is a little bit of history about the project, but certainly where this project is headed. Okay, the opportunities, the great things that are going on. So if we could, I'm going to turn it over to Rick, Renee, and Darnell. Thank you for being here, and we'll get the program started. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. I've been elected to do the backgrounding, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues to talk about Detroit and what this means for Detroit itself. My name is Rick Foster. I hold the chair in Food Society and Sustainability here. And in that, the goal of that chair is to look at global implications of food, water, and energy, and how those global implications manifest themselves in the cities of Michigan, linking local, global, that sort of thing. So when we position this kind of work that we're trying to do, we talk about the global imperatives and the local opportunity. So I'd like to just do that very quickly if I could. The global imperative is looking out, 40 years from now in 2050 when there's 10 billion people on the planet. And 70% of them live in urban areas around the world. And in the U.S., it'll be 90%. It's not a big deal because our city has that kind of capacity that it can respond to that kind of concentration. But Nairobi, Kenya will be the largest city in Africa. It will not have that capacity. The water, the health, public health, the air quality, the food availability, all those things will be challenged in metropolitan areas around the world as this increased density in unplanned situations starts to manifest itself. So our question for ourselves is how can we impact global communities as they go into this and use cities like Detroit to not only help themselves prepare a position for that kind of global role in the future, but also look at the assets that they have to build their own new kinds of economies based on the issues that the world will confront, making Detroit a very relevant and resilient city in the future. So, sounds like a big gap to fill, but thinking about it now is imperative. If we don't think about it today, then we will never get to the kind of positioning we want to be. So, we'll need to double our food production. We need to do it with less water and energy than we currently use. That requires us to think about a food system, an energy system, and a water system that works together in integrated systems that starts to be highly, highly productive. So when we look at a city like Detroit, we see availability of land, of buildings. We see an engineering base coming out of the auto industry. We see the high technologies that are available there that can be applicable to other kinds of innovation. And if you're a global land-grant university like we would like to be, and we are, but we would like to be in position now, then all of a sudden we start to ask ourselves as a university, as Michigan State, how do we position research and innovation in an open space like Detroit to not only be the one of the assets on which they rebuild themselves, but an asset that can be utilized throughout the world. So we're linking the work that we're doing in Detroit with 7 other major cities around the world. We're linking it with a regional emphasis on development in the Great Lakes. But the proof of the pudding will be, can we in Detroit be successful? There's this big food movement, as you already are very well aware of. It's happening certainly in Lansing with the Food Innovation District that we're talking about here. Kalamazoo and Bronson are putting their heads together to talk about food and health and how they look at local food as preventative measures. The huge emphasis in Grand Rapids. All of that is happening. The food hubs all across the state. But our perspective is that unless Detroit is successful, Michigan can't be successful as a whole. So this work is about how we position Detroit as playing a significant role in how the global scenario plays out as well. So we want to acknowledge that there is a huge amount of inspirational activity already happening in the city, already happening. Our goal is to think of ways that we can connect it so that we create the educational network, the research network, the innovation network that we all can be a part of, that we can expedite the changes that we need. So I want to kind of lay out that big picture because I think it's important to know where Michigan State University fits in to this scenario. One of many higher education institutions with a stake in Detroit. And I think our largest city ought to look at us and have expectations of how we could serve it as well. So that land-grant mission, yeah, it's alive and well in Detroit. I want to acknowledge our two colleagues that are with us. Renee Wallace is the project director for project manager for FoodPLUS Detroit. Darnell Adams, a key partner in the work that's happening in the community. So let me turn to Renee and say, what is FoodPLUS Detroit?
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I hope you won't mind if I stand. I feel a little more comfortable and connected to you if I'm not back there and I'm up here with you. As Rick kind of laid the foundation and kind of gives the big picture about FoodPLUS, what really excited us about being here today is about us. It's really all about, I wore the shirt that we put together for our convening, and this actually came out of our involvement in the community and talking to people who have already done great foundational work around food in Detroit. This is an innovation coalition that's designed to be multi-stakeholder represented. So we've got people that have community and societal interests, people like myself who have business interests, knowledge institutions, and government. And that allows us to create a base of people that together is going to create innovation because we're going to have a variety of different perspectives. So we've got some real foundational kinds of things that we're basing our work on. Our ability to be able to co-create together. So instead of being off in little silos doing stuff, how do we work more effectively together to design, develop, and determine what it is we're actually going for and have those perspectives in the beginning. So we start out, from that place. We talk about the knowledge sharing aspect. People know a lot of stuff, but it's not connected. I'm over on the east side doing stuff and people on the west side have no access to it. We have a lot of resources, but they're disconnected. People have resources, they don't even consider resources. So we're asking people to think about who they are and their experience in different ways. And we talk about it from the perspective of what does your next look like. And in the word your, we consider the fact that you have a personal interest. You have a stake, you have something that you're working for, but your something is connected to all of it. All of our work together is what's going to help us actually make the kind of changes that we need to make. So we start from that perspective of people looking at what you have. You come to this coalition with your ideas, your dreams, your projects, but we intersect that. We integrate that. And we take a look at, if I put your project in the middle of the table, you bring it, you've got all your great ideas, your team, you brainstormed and all this great stuff. But then I invite all these other people who are part of the coalition to take a look at this. What happens to your project? When we add all of that thinking, all of those resources to your project, now we can accelerate the work. That's the story, the message. That's our intention. That's our plan. That's our vision in Detroit. And people in Detroit that have been doing this work are excited about it. At the convening, we had 83 people. Now, part of that was a subset of us who have been involved in helping put meat on the bones, as you would say. A year ago, there was an initial convening where this idea was introduced to a body of folk in Detroit. A subset of us, about 18 or so of us, went away and worked very diligently to define what this coalition is. So why are we here today? We're here today because Michigan State, as the lead convener who brought the idea to the table, has been very, very involved in this, and you are a significant strategic partner to us in Detroit. It's going to take all of us. who you are, what you know, what you dream, the science that you do, the research that you do, is all going to be necessary for us to get it done. For Detroit, for Michigan, for the world, because we're plugged in. We recognize that Detroit looks a lot like Johannesburg. When we met the folks, when we did the global convening in February, we had the opportunity to meet with the other folks from the other innovation coalitions. We found out we had a lot of similarities. So the things that we're working on, we can share knowledge. So we're going to build that platform. So we came here today to find out a little bit from you, to understand what your interests are. Every project will have some research aspect to it, whether it is community-based participatory research, because we believe that the folks on the ground have to be doers and contributors as well as some people need to be in the lab, figuring out the technology of how the plants do what they do. Us on the ground, I don't know that. No, I don't want to know that. But there's ways to bring all of this to bear. So what we wanted to do today was just come share with you, what does that engagement look like? How do we build? Because our intention as we build this innovation model is to create a pipeline that continues to generate new opportunities for projects. We're starting with 5, and those 5 are based upon challenges that we already knew existed. Those challenges were already informed by a lot of information. And I'll just share those quickly, and I'm going to kind of back up because I know this is a dialogue and I want you to ask questions. So some of the challenges that we set out immediately to address with our first set of projects was this limited capacity for local food production. So one of them is scaling up, building capacity to actually grow more food locally using technology, working with an existing body of growers. We've got a lot of people who are on the bubble. They've been growing a while. They're sourcing farmers markets and things like that. But collectively, we're going to help build that capacity so they can meet the needs of institutions as well as in the community. So that's one of the issues we focus on. Another is how do we convert this food waste to useful products like compost. We're starting there. So we've got people been doing it, but we don't have the capacity. We got way more food waste than we have the capacity to process right now. We can't even produce it. So we're working on that. Gaps in the food system. How do we strategically identify the things that we work on? So we're partnering with organizations like Detroit Food and Fitness Collaborative, who will in January produce the outcomes from their economic impact analysis that they're doing on the food system in Detroit. Working with the Food Policy Council, they're revising the food security policy that really kind of got all this stuff started back in 2008, as well as supporting the actual implementation of the Urban Ag Ordinance. Wonderful thing to pass an ordinance. It's beautiful, it's a lot of work. However, operationalizing it is a whole other thing, as well as getting people in the community to accept the fact that we now can grow our own food. We can actually now sell land in the city to grow food. We couldn't do that. It was happening under the radar, kind of, sort of. But now we can actually do it. The animal piece is next. That's a big, big deal. So we'll be working on that, which includes bees. So those are some of the things that we're already doing. You know, how do you plug into that? As we build this pipeline of strategic projects, we want to learn a little bit about your interests. Where are your research interests? Where are the service opportunities, like certain departments? I love my partners, MSUglobal team. I absolutely love them. They are helping us build this platform so that that connectivity that I talked about, the networked resources, the integrated of our teams working together, being able to share knowledge, they're helping us build that platform and to create that presence. So people can engage in a variety of different ways. Some of it is the services you provide, other is the research that you do. So I've said enough. I was told this was a dialogue. So I'm going to kind of, that was the background. But I'd like to just hear from you. What is it you're interested in as it relates to projects and research opportunities or opportunities to serve out of the work that you presently do? So don't be shy.
Hi, my name is Caroline Kinsey. I am the supervising attorney of the actual MSU Law practicum, and we're an urban agriculture practicum. And so we are actually providing free legal services to anybody who has assistance or needs assistance with contract drafting, business formation, interpreting regulations. So anything that your local growers in Detroit would kind of come to, we actually provide free legal services. So there's two of us and one of the main attorneys. This is one of my students actually that I brought with me. And so our role, there's 6 students, and we provide free legal services along the way. So I think our biggest thing is, spreading the awareness and then getting connected with people who need our services. Because we have lawyers who are ready to do work, we just need the clientele at this point.
Are you located in Detroit?
We actually have both. We actually just received an office on Woodward Avenue, so if you know where the MSU Detroit Center is, we meet with clients down there. We go to the Eastern Market on a pretty regular basis as well to do some client recruitment, some outreach as well. We went to the FoodPLUS event in September. So we're really starting to get out in the community, but we will have meetings both in our East Lansing location, which is on Abbott Road, and then at Woodward Center as well.
And so in knowing that they were available, when we look at our projects for like the composting project as well as the growers project, we already have identified certain things that we really do need their help with. The other thing is FoodPLUS is still, we're looking at the kind of entity that we want to be, because we'll serve organizations and individuals that are profit and nonprofit. So although we'll have a nonprofit base, we'll also need the ability to work with organizations that are for-profit, because that funding can look a little different and kind of support.
I think that's an important thing to clarify now, because in terms of how you as individuals or research units or departments would engage with FoodPLUS Detroit, FoodPLUS Detroit is no longer just Rick's project, right? Christopher's project at all. It's not done yet. It's an emerging nonprofit organization, so it will have, within months, its own nonprofit status, likely a 501c3. And this is very much how MSU operates internationally. MSU, to have partners on the ground and really be embedded in a community when we do international work, is we work with NGOs. So many of those we help create in one way or another. And then when we go for a grant, they're going with us for the funding to a foundation or a development agency. It's not MSU going on their behalf. It's the local group who's in action going with us as partners. And many times, it's not just MSU getting the funding. The in-country partner is the place that's getting the funding. We're MSU is a subcontractor to them, or vice versa. But having this status, I think, this emerging way of organizing makes a big difference in terms of how people here are going to think about engaging with FoodPLUS.
Oh, sure. And actually, we took that a step further, because the actual leadership is really folk out of Detroit. MSU is a strategic partner, and they're a member of a coalition just like everybody else. They fit in that constituent group called knowledge institutions. So what that does is it gives everybody the opportunity, to engage from their, perspective. And this was something that Rick was very adamant about in the beginning, and I'll use that word because he really was, that we didn't want people thinking, okay, this is just another, not that it's a bad thing, another MSU thing, because you guys do great work. But what was important was that because food and the work around food has been so grassroots oriented in Detroit, there's so many people that are vested in that, people have an interest in developing, we have an interest in developing our own solutions. And we want to partner with as many people as possible. So we have leaders, we have presently our format, we had about 18 folk who stayed very connected to the initiative. When we did the convening in September, that expanded the table. We now have more people who are involved in the coalition, but the leadership of the work groups and things like that are all Detroit-based folks. And so we will actually be, leading that work, but supported by many strategic partners like MSU, like others who have. And part of what we wanted to do, is those of us who are part of the been around the table a lot, like Darnell and Kathy Underwood, who some of you will meet tomorrow, is to ensure that we're able to practice what we preach. When we talk about being multi-stakeholder and then also resource network, part of being here with you today is how do we connect all of this? You all know each other, you pass each other, you do stuff, but how can we pull all of that power together and leverage it around significant projects in Detroit? And you might learn to discover things about yourself in that process. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Would that be wonderful? That's one of my goals. I hope that's wonderful. So what do you want? I hope it is. process that we're going to use to generate projects that you connect to. What can I tell you about that?
Well, I guess, I was thinking, my question was, I think the connection's lovely, and I think that the biggest challenge, I can think of 1,000 things that we would have in our resource pool, right? But what's unclear to me is the best practice and what works best for your network for us to enter, right? Because I think that's the most challenging piece. I can think of 1,000 things that I think are important, but they may not be important to you, or what's the best practice to interact with your organization?
Good question, good question. So part of that is an orientation to who we are and how we operate. So our values, guiding principles, we start there with everybody. Because this way of working is not for everybody. Everybody doesn't want to do it like this. Some folks just want to take this stuff and go this way, and they're not trying to do this collaboratively with lots of people. So we first orient you to who we are and how we work. And back to the challenges that we've identified. So like the 5 projects that we're currently doing is a great place to start. I have a profile that I developed working with Rick and others of different folks in MSU who do things that could be connected to the projects. So we're reaching out, to you to get that. Same thing, when you reach to us, we have that opportunity to kind of orient you to where we are with the current challenges. But then also, we're looking to learn from you about things that we may not see yet. You're doing stuff globally. There's stuff you may see and say, well, did you know that this was even a possibility? So you're going to help inform as well. So the point is just reach out to us, and we'll have that conversation. We'll bring you into the space with others who are part of this coalition, and we'll talk about it. That's how we got to where we are now. We sat down and identified discreetly what we wanted to do and who we want to be. Because there was a big question in Detroit about why another organization? Why another doggone organization? And we have created a way of differentiating ourselves, because we're creating a platform that integrates things that are already going on. Like I said earlier, all this knowledge is out there, but you can't point to any place and get to a broad base of knowledge. A lot of resources, but you can't. You don't know who all the players are. There's no place you can go. Our platform is going to help to establish that, in the community, and make it okay to experiment. Because a lot of people are caught in situations where the only way they can get anybody's attention is they can prove that 1,400 people already did it. But that's not what we're saying. That's not innovation, unless you're adapting and doing some other stuff. But what we're doing is creating that space. So what you're doing, share with us. Hey, I've been working on this kind of stuff as it relates to food, agriculture, and energy, and water, and I'd like to share that, and we bring it into the space, and we see what happens with that. Okay, great question.
Can I add something there?
Mm-hmm.
I think in conversations like this and others, what we would hope, one of the things we'd hope to leave with you is that we're working toward an expansive agenda, not a contracting one. And Detroit is a very difficult place to work, as we all know. It's a very difficult place to work. A lot of self-interest, a lot of mistrust, all those sorts of things. So what we've been attempting to do with this organization is bridge those self-interest, and it took us a long time, but we've come to a place now where I think all of our partners agree that they're better off being under a larger umbrella. They can meet their self-interest, and they can do something bigger for the city. So we would love it if you would come and say, what if we would do this? What if we would put on a food safety program uniquely for an expanding food production and processing operation in Detroit? I want to give you an example real quickly. There's a company in Detroit called Garden Fresh. If you've ever had any of their salsa, it's to die for. Best in the world, I think. They import, or they purchase 28 million pounds of tomatoes a year, none of it from Michigan. They use 1 million pounds of cilantro a year, none of it from Michigan. I don't know how much peppers, onions, etc., none of it is from Michigan. Why wouldn't we start to imagine the food growing culture in the city of Detroit using abandoned buildings and high technologies as well as the land base, and say, we can be a food exporting city in the next 10 years, 15 years. So we want to set that kind of a bar for all of us to think about. is that we now maybe are just this close to having an organization that can speak for the larger agenda and not the self-interest agenda, and that opens up all kinds of possibilities. What would happen if there was a USDA urban agriculture facility in Detroit? So that's the kind of thinking we hope will start to be generated by these kinds of conversations.
So let's add something to the list. Julie, can we put up there?
All right, well, yeah, so I got a lot of food safety things I can do. So certainly, I work with basically an online master's program of food safety where everybody is already, a mid-level manager in the food industry. So there's a lot of common availability of knowledge. And so I've been trying to think about how to engage those students better in, they have required projects and community projects and how to engage them in this. So I think that would be another one. The other thing, which we don't have, but I'm going to talk to my veterinarian because I'm a veterinarian as well. I think that if, as the livestock side of things evolve, there's not a lot of work on urban livestock health, right? And so if we started thinking about that now, so we're leading in preparation to think about what would be needed there, that would be a really great group and honestly would be absolutely unique among at least North American colleges of veterinary medicine. No one else would have that.
Tell them yours, but
That's excellent.
Oh, my special needs? Pigs and monkeys.
Ah, okay.
But I'm also a crazy chicken lady too.
Oh,
Crazy chicken ladies. Chicken lady?
You just got your name on the back of your
And
t-shirt.
crazy chicken lady. I'm a
Crazy chicken lady.
Yeah, 'cause I got my own chickens, so.
That's very important, and
Yeah.
knowing that we're thinking about that will help people in the city of Detroit and the governmental side of it understand that some of the issues that normally come up as complaints and nuisances and things like that, when we're talking to them and we share with them that we're already thinking about those things, we're already thinking about how do you best care for these animals in an urban setting, how do you deal with the kinds of things that are going to help us be neighborhood friendly. In this work, it's going to be important for them to hear that. We've already had our first meeting with them about composting. Catherine Underwood is launching the team that's actually going to work on the urban livestock ordinance. And some of the early things that we hear are very common. It's the whole nuisances, it's the smell, it's noise, it's, how does that work when I live right here and you're doing that right over there? How do we actually fit this in the context of the city? Mark, you had a question or a comment?
Well, yeah, I was just,
say who you are so everybody knows here.
I'm Mark Fellows. I'm with CABS, which is Communications and Brand Strategy, and I've worked with Rick and the crew and Chris on occasion on this for, since we launched in Detroit. My concern is always, where's the capital for these kinds of things? Can you bring in entrepreneurship and venture capital? Can you find external partners to, who see some money to be made, actually? It has recently come to my attention, or been, again come to my attention, that, there are external corporations that, frankly, could use some positive publicity in the areas of obesity, of nutrition, some of these kinds of things. But they don't want to throw the money into a raffle. What they want is a good show project.
Right.
And I'm wondering what's happening there.
Well, actually, one of our initial projects, which is the waste management, focusing on composting facilities, is actually intended to create commercial scale composting.
Is this the waste management?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so first of all, we've got to get the legislation in place. We're already working on that in the city. We have a group of entrepreneurs who are already doing composting that want to scale up. We've also connected to the McDonald's Corporation, which produces a tremendous amount of food waste. And we're looking to do a pilot with them in Detroit.
And we need a lot of potatoes.
Yeah, well, we haven't talked about potatoes yet. Right now, we're talking about the coffee grounds and other organic matter, getting it out so it doesn't end up in the landfill. It ends up, in our composting facilities.
So
we need transportation systems. So that is triggering a number of things. So McDonald's is one of the corporations. Forgotten Harvest is involved. Because again, they got a lot of input because a lot of food, gets wasted along the way. So as we're building that out, we're looking for that commercial side of it and who can we attract to this project. So that's our intention, even with the growers, because we have people who are growing, like I said, on the bubble. they can't grow enough capacity. We have people who want to feed the kids in Detroit public schools, but right now today, they don't have enough capacity. So we've got to put our brains together and get the right people at the table to say, well, we add this technology, we add this business development, component, we wrap these things around them. They're putting in a certain amount of equity of their own. Who else will contribute to something that we can actually show you what that outcome is going to be, and it can produce money. Betty Wiggins buys a lot of food.
Yeah, I just encourage you to pursue demonstration projects with companies that are interested in globally connected local solutions.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Jim.
Renee, first I apologize to Rick because he's heard this from me many times. I've been here at Michigan State for 48 years. Like I said, I'm older than dirt, but I've had international experiences dealing with food safety and human health. And it seems like I want to follow up on one of the things that Rick said about identifying something in Detroit that could make meaningful impact on the economy of Detroit as well as the health. For example, most of you may know that underneath the city of Detroit is one of the biggest salt mines. And near Detroit is Domino's Pizza. It turns out 90% of all the mushrooms grown and used in the United States, used in the United States, comes from China. Where do you grow mushrooms? In dark caves, like salt mines. The only major site of making mushrooms in the United States is in Pennsylvania, in the coal mines, all right? So it seems like a high-value food production right there in Detroit to be utilizing that unutilized space. It's cold, it's dark, it's ripe for mushrooms. The second is one of the most valued foods is fish. And the best freshwater fish is the perch. If you've been to Myers just recently, you notice you pay $13 a pound for perch. Where does that perch come from? It doesn't come from Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, Lake Superior. It comes from Canada. All right? Every perch that you buy at Myers is Canadian. Why? Right in Detroit, you can have fish hatcheries making walleye, perch, whitefish, all the high value fish that could be sold here in Michigan. So that's just two things. The third thing.
Wait, before you do your third, tell us your name and your area.
Oh, I'm
so
sorry.
remember.
James Trosco, Jim
James.
Trosco,
Thank you, Jim.
Department of Pediatrics and Human Development, College of Human Medicine. And the other thing happens to be related to the global health problem today is metabolic diseases. And it turns diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease. And it turns out, I've studied the atomic bomb survivors in Japan, one of the best diets of the world. And we now know the reason why even the survivors of the atomic bombs live longer than anybody in the world is because of their diet. And particularly of the mothers who gave rise to the children who were exposed to the atomic bombs. Now, it turns out, if the bomb had been dropped in Detroit, we now know that the breast cancer frequency, which is so low in Japan, is so high in Detroit. And it's because the mothers of the children, of the daughters who were born of these women, were exposed to two different kinds of diets. In other words, the impact of food and diet and nutrition, which is basically political, economic, and educational, not scientific. I mean, we could make a big impact on the children, the 3 billion you just mentioned, the 3 billion babies that are going to be born before the end of this century. Now, obviously, people with gunshots and cancer, broken bones need critical care immediately. But we have to start thinking of using all these resources today for prevention, because that's really what's going to bring down globally this the crisis. 3 billion babies being born whose mothers had a bad nutritional and physical environment. We can make a big impact today, and it's educational, basically dealing with how nutrition can prevent diseases later in life. And that's all I have to
That's
say.
great. See, I think Jim just invented his launch pad, because you said you're retiring in 2 months, did you
That's
say?
right.
He's gonna come to Detroit and help us make that stuff happen. There you go. And you make a really good point, because we talk about food and we talk about agriculture, but it really is about quality of life. It's about what is the impact that we're going to have on quality of life. And there's a lot of social innovation that has to happen to create the mind change and all the other things for people to embrace that. You can grow all the lovely foods you want, but if nobody eats it, so the social innovation is a big part of this. One of the things we've discovered in talking to people, because everybody likes the sexy technology conversation, right? Everybody wants to in on that conversation. But the hard work is the social innovation. It's creating the environment that says, yes, we will do this, we embrace it, it's ours, and there's benefit to us, and we're going to be creative and innovative about how we get there. So thank you for sharing that, because it has that impact. But the big deal underneath that is, how do we make the shift? You know, how do we put our brains together? Look at what's happening in this room, in a conversation that's 15 minutes in. So imagine what's happening as we create this platform. A couple of things that we're looking to do to keep this pipeline of innovative ideas going is that we will host quarterly, and it may change in frequency, this is our initial thinking, an event where we talk about and we identify challenges, and many folk like yourself who are experts out of our constituent groups will inform and provide information about those challenges. Then we'll host an event with people who have ideas about that and create the space for them to work on those ideas and refine those ideas. Out of that will pop some potential projects. So that gives us some strategic work to do. And as we look at the resources available to fit with what we do and all of that, we'll be able to select some projects. And as we know more about your interests, because my intention is to know exactly what you want, get it on a profile, and call you. You're in the room. Hey, this idea came up. You weren't in the room. This idea came up. And to be able to get the right people in the room, put the project in the middle, and make it the absolute best we can with all of our thinking, all of our input, all of our resources. I tell people say, well, I don't have any resources. And I always use the example of Jesus when he was watching the collection plate. When he was sitting by the door and he was watching the collection process, right? Everybody walks by, Mark comes by, and he drops in a whole handful of stuff, and Rob comes by and he drops a bunch of stuff in. I come by, I'm a little widow, I drop this little mite in there, and Jesus stops the process. Stop right here. And he said that she gave the most. Why did she give the most? Because she gave out of what she had, her substance. She didn't give out her excess. She didn't have any excess. So I use that example to tell people, you got something to contribute. Everybody has something to contribute to this process. So in those places where we create space to incubate new ideas around a challenge, we put the challenge in the middle of the table. We'll host an event, invite people to come and create ideas about how we're going to get there, refine your idea, have a space that supports that, kind of positive environment, energy, suspending words like difficult place. I don't feel pick on Rick, but suspending those words. Don't even bring that in the room. Don't even bring that in the room. You know what I'm saying? Because that creates a whole nother idea. But I leave that outside. If you still need it when you leave, pick it up. But I promise you won't. You won't need it after being in the room. That's the kind of environment that we're talking about creating. So out of that will pop some strategic opportunities to move some things forward. And we'll be able to pick, based upon the resources we have and what we can do, which projects. Now, projects can happen in 2 ways. And I'll use the example of the 5 we started with. 2 of those projects are FoodPLUS Detroit managed projects, the compost system and the growing systems one. The other 3 are projects that are owned by coalition members. You know, Blair Evans, the Detroit Center for Community-Based Production, is really focused on, you know, how you create new work and new economies in communities, with people knowing how to sustain themselves